Hello, 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 and welcome back to my channel. Today we have another video about the most beautiful banknotes. This will be episode number 9, and today I'm going to talk about Pick 31, Egyptian 5 pounder from the 50s. But before, as in any video that I do, we're going to talk a bit about the background until we come to this banknote. And of course, you all have been taught at least superficially about Egyptian history in your history class. Egypt is, of course, one of the most important empires of the old civilizations. It's actually as old as 32 centuries before Christ, and it remained fully independent with fighting here and there in different parts, and with a territory that was mostly around the Nile River, not what it is today, Egypt. So mostly the lands around the Nile River all the way into what is now South Sudan until the third century before Christ or second century before Christ, when it was conquered by Greeks and then by the Romans afterwards. After that, the civilization is a bit different. There's different parts of Egypt that we'll not go into right now because Egypt lost a bit of its historic importance at that point of time, at least what is for global history. Basically, what is kept from Egyptian imagination in our culture comes a bit from these ancient times. It's the pharaohs, it's the pyramids, it's this all adventure style archaeology that is a bit the fascination of older Egypt or but of course, they came with times. There was medieval Egypt, which we're not going to go much into detail. And then, of course, Egypt, starting in the late 18th century, was occupied first by the Ottoman Empire, and then by the French, and finally in the late 19th century by the British in their endeavors actually to connect Cape Town to Cairo as having a one line in Africa that they could fit from top to bottom or from north to south. Basically, the Brits remained, Egypt remained part of the British Empire all the way until 1922 when it gained some independence. Although, to be honest, independence was just on paper, and they were still very dependent on Britain all the way until 1952. A good symbol of the dependence on Britain is actually what you see here on the right side of the picture is King Farouk, which, although the King of Egypt was basically bribed north and south by the Brits and not really ruling so much for the Egyptian nationals, but we are not going to talk about that specifically. The banknotes of 1952 actually start with the revolution of the same year from Nasser, and basically for the first time dropping British influence on the country. So the series that we're going to talk about is this one here. As you see, it's a very colorful series of 7 banknotes that go from the 25 piastre to the 100 pounder. 100 pound being a lot of money at the time, and they all have Tutankhamun pharaoh in the front. Going to the banknote itself, and it might not be like the most colorful, but you'll see in the back why I find this banknote extremely beautiful. But a bit about a bit some interesting portions here. Um, here in the here behind, you can see the previous version of this banknote, and basically what he did was to change King's Farouk portrait by Tutankhamun that you see here, or at least the mask. Why they did this? Well, it's to create a sense of independence of Britain. Also, something that you can see is this more Arabization of the country, caused also by the revolution, is that we don't have numerals in Roman or the numerals that are used in Europe, and they put Arabic numerals here as serial numbers, which is another point here just to enforce that British rule was not so important anymore. The fact that they use Tutankhamun is also peculiar because actually this mask was discovered by British archaeology back in the 20s. And it's not that Tutankhamun, although beautiful, this mask, which is on display in the Cairo Museum, he was not really that important of a pharaoh. He was from 13th century before Christ, actually was very debilitated, had a lot of diseases, ruled Egypt as pharaoh since a very young age, I think 7 or 8 years old when he came to power, and actually died when he was 18 or 19. So he only stayed there for 10 years. He was actually very relevant. So it's quite peculiar that the most important symbology of Egypt is a pharaoh that was not the most important one, or not closest to being an important one in Egypt, but just because the mask that was found in pristine condition is very beautiful. Also, what is interesting, and they kept this, is a bit of the Islamic culture here with the mosque. Each one of these series will have a different mosque here on one of the sides. But why, for me, this banknote is so beautiful is actually the back, which again seems not at first glance you wouldn't say that this is an Egyptian banknote. And actually, the statue here that is depicted, it's nowadays in the Vatican Museum. It's a statue that was found in Rome in the 16th century, early 16th century, after excavations. It's probably known, or is said to be a copy of another statue that was in Alexandria, now Egypt, but that no longer exists. And it's supposed to be a copy of that one that they put in Rome somewhere in the beginning of the first century um, before Christ, when the Romans had control of Egypt, and they also took a lot of the Egyptian gods as their own in a mixture. I'm not going to go too much into this history portion, but that's really the background of the statue. And it's the statue itself. It's called the Nile River, and if you see in detail, you'll see here on the right side the Sphinx, and here on the statue you see the water. It's of course not here anymore, um, but it's quite a strange monument to put in the back of a banknote, something that either does not exist anymore, or the one that exists is a copy from the 14th century, or from Roman times, that is in the Vatican, or there's also a second copy similar to this one in in Naples, also in Italy. Good. This banknote is actually not that expensive. Even the different variants of the banknote are not so expensive. The standard catalog of world paper money defines uncirculated between 50 and 25 bucks. The banknote book has around 30 bucks. And to be honest, except for the 31B, which I could only find sales information in almost uncirculated at more than $50. The other ones you can find exactly in these ranges. Uh, 31D, which is the oldest one, I think from 1959, you can find uncirculated for around 18 bucks, which is a very nice price. This banknote did have some specimens in trial. So specimen um, is actually the not that different from, or actually the same as the banknote. Only has specimen here, and of course the numeral is 00001 or 1000. But very curious is this color trial, which is mostly in, well, the front and the back. It's more of a reddish, brownish reddish here. Of course, it has specimen here, but the back, instead of green, it's then on this brown red uh, color. These are well, not so easy to find, so I didn't put the values there because they are basically just very few out there, and the price would not be reliable even if I put it here. Well, nowadays, Egypt, for those of you that went there, it's basically, or it was until a few years ago, due to some terrorist activities, basically an excess of tourists, not only for the Egyptian culture, but also for the beaches and the Mediterranean coast. Um, but Egypt, besides Nasser and all the development that he brought to the country as being an unaligned in the time of the Soviet Union against the U.S. Uh, kind of time, he never really managed to get complete hold of the deep corruption and also the amount of poverty that exists still today in Egypt. The governments are, well, since that time, Nasser was also a military man. The governments have been since then either military dictatorships, or at least the president has been backed by the military, which is basically an institution in the country. Also sad is that in the crisis in the early 2010s led the Egyptian pound to quickly devaluate. There was even a time where the black market exchange rates in Egypt, which don't exist anymore, but nowadays 200 pounds is not close as valuable as they were back in 52. Yeah, and that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this video, a bit about the pick 31 of Egypt, but also a bit about history and some personal opinion on the country. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, just let me know. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.